Om Hiranmaye Parikoshe Virajan Brahmanishkalam Tachubram Jyotisham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vidho Vidhu Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, ever pure, free from all taint, the essence of everything which all beings seek, either consciously or unconsciously. There shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Shatagunam Vidyan Mananam Mananadapi Nidijasam Lakshagunam Anantam Nirvikalpakam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hearing about Brahman, the reality, is good. Taking teachings on Brahman is better. Better still is meditation directly upon Brahman. But best of all is that meditation in which all doubt about the nature of reality dies away forever. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Svagatam, welcome, welcome to our Vedanta society here in the big island of Hawaii. We are live streaming to you the last or fifth class, last in a series called Success and Failure in Spiritual Life. And many of you have written in, the live streaming audience, and already commented on what a beneficial class it's been. And we started with rudimentary basics, which most of us probably don't have a problem with anymore, like the 6 passions and the 8 fetters, although they still accompany our life because that is things like lust and anger and greed and envy and jealousy and pride and shame and grief, and the whole list that we looked at is there in the collective mind. And even if as an individual you manage to free yourself from those, although Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said you'll never free yourself completely from them as long as you have an ego, an individual self, that you just have to keep them at a minimum. But if you manage to keep them at a minimum, then you find yourself peaceful. Samapatti, that is one of the 3 great treasures of yoga, is called samapatti. It means an even and quiet mind. And if you can attain to that mind, then you find yourself able to meditate on Brahman, as we were just chanting. It's good to hear about Brahman. The teachings are better if you hear about the teachings about Brahman, and then better still if you can meditate straight on Brahman. But you can't just hear something, a sloka like that, and then think, well, I'll just jump to the best, because you may need to still attenuate the mind and by degrees. As Sri Ramchandra, the oldest of all avatars on record we know of, said, you must gain enlightenment of mind by stages. That flash that you're looking for of enlightenment is very rare, and it only comes after some substantial qualification has been earned on your part as a sadhaka. As the word in Sanskrit is sadhana, means it's a very rare thing that people, particularly in the West, are doing a spiritual discipline, a sadhana. Some of them are practicing morality and ethics, we hope, and others are pursuing the goals of earthly life and so forth, whatever the case may be. But it's a very rare person who, even beyond studying a subject, becomes a practitioner of a subject. We know the collegiate level is about study and memorization and so forth, and that prepares the mind. But when you get to this word called sadhana, spiritual practice, then that's the cutting edge of transformation of mind. That is, that peaceful mind that you're going to gain by stages becomes like an old friend that you're welcoming home after a long time, doesn't it? You just all of a sudden feel, yes, I remember peace of mind. I remember samapatti or samatva or samadhana or any of those sam words in Sanskrit that relate to peace of mind, basically. As our ideal here, Sri Sharda Devi, my teacher's teacher, said, you need peace of mind first and foremost. So you should not be giving your peace of mind away for anything. Family, spouse, wealth. I mentioned those three because those are what we looked at 4 weeks ago when we looked at some of the impediments to spiritual life. Family, wife, husband, children, spouse, those are impediments to spiritual life unless they're made dharmic. That is, if you bring the Dharma or the teachings into your household, then all of a sudden the husband becomes Shiva, the wife becomes Shakti. The children turn from evil little beings, running around causing troubles with the neighbors, to these well-informed young souls that are back on track, you see, with the purpose of their life. Most people forget the purpose of their life when they enter the body. It's quite natural in a society like this, in a time like this, which is called Kali Yuga, that you would fall into forgetfulness. That's a very key word in Sanskrit called smriti. Smriti means, usually they use it in accordance with scriptures that you memorize, secondary scriptures quite often, but nonetheless you can also take it into the context of smriti bedu. It means a kind of memory in you that remembers past lifetimes. According to the father of yoga, the reason we don't remember our past lifetimes is gift giving, commerce. It's one of the teachings of the yamas and niyamas of yoga, the first two limbs of yoga, is that when you're engaging in commerce with money, wealth, family, so forth, as we just mentioned, then that takes away all your time to meditate, and so then you don't remember your past lifetimes. And that becomes an impression in your mind from lifetime to lifetime that you're born in ignorance. We know there are words for that in Buddhism, samsara, and in Vedanta, maya. See that queen of all four-letter words we're talking about, maya. So we know that thinkers as far back as 550 years prior to Christ, that's Lord Buddha, and even further back than that, in the form of some of Vedavyas in his earlier incarnations, have mentioned words like samsara and maya. Why is that we should be born again in ignorance all the time? If they asked Swami Vivekananda once, our other ideal here, one of our other three ideals in SRV, Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda, they asked him once, should a man be reborn? And he said, I certainly hope he will not till he can do so in full consciousness. So you might call life rather like a practice for being born and dying consciously. It's not a goal people usually set for themselves, but that's really because of forgetfulness of their divine nature. This peace of mind, holding this peace of mind all the time. At least sattva, they have the three gunas, the of nature. Rajas is restlessness, and many people are under the press of that. Tamas is slothfulness, and that comes to most minds. Sometimes people are born in just with slothful mind. I know several people who have been that way all their life and hardly ever get out of it, depressed. And but then there's this higher guna, or this higher mode of nature to attain, and that's called sattva. It's a balanced mind. Usually the problem with sattva is that it seeks pleasure, because once it feels the problems of restlessness and slothfulness go away, the weights go away, then it thinks, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. And that's the deceptive part of it, is that it's going to be replaced in cycles by slothfulness and restlessness. That when you feel fine, you don't remember how it was to feel lousy. And when you feel lousy, you don't remember what it was like to feel fine again. So these cycles are constantly masquerading for one another, interchanging. And but when you find a soul that's attained sattva all the time, then, or when you yourself can attain sattva all the time, then you feel balanced. And that's again, the problem with that is I don't think I need to do my practice anymore, my sadhana, because I think I've attained the goal all of a sudden. But the goal is far beyond pleasure or feeling good or happiness or any of those things. It's even beyond contentment, which is a nice thing to have. It's one of the 6 treasures of Vedanta. It's called contentment. Inner peace, self-control, self-settledness, sometimes they call it. But far beyond all of those then is this enlightenment or illumination of mind, or purity of mind. And what I chanted early before class here, nirvikalpa. Nirvikalpa, that highest state of consciousness where all doubt about the nature of reality is gone forever. Gone forever. And you're not just in a mentally balanced peace of mind anymore, you're in a transcendent state. Like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Ramana Maharshi, some of these, Swami Vivekananda, some of these great souls that had this masterful condition, or conditionless condition of consciousness. One begins to run out of words when one tries to describe it. And just Brahman or Atman or Nirvikalpa. Satori in Zen, we talked about Zen just before the class began. Or Buddha nature, Pragyaparam, pure intelligence. I think the Muslims call it Fana. There are many names for it in different traditions. So it's a very non-dual state of awareness that takes you over when you can maintain an even state of mind for a long time. It's sort of like your penultimate goal. It's just, I think I will try and just make my goal for now balance and never deviate from that. See how long I can hold balance. And of course, it's sort of like breathing in yoga. As you're breathing in, holding, and breathing out, eventually you can calm your heart rate, you can master your breath, and you can make your mind free of thoughts. I was going to say thoughtless, but that might convey a different meaning. But free of thoughts. And so that is spiritual success. Whereas failure in spiritual life, as we've talked about, has to do with the impingement of or infringement upon your peace of mind by lust and anger and greed and envy and jealousy and pride and shame and fear and grief. We looked at them all in the first class of this series. They were called the 4 deadly traps, the 6 passions, the 8 fetters, the 5 kleshas of yoga, the 9 antaryayas or obstacles. We looked at a whole host of them that I had on several different charts. I'm apt to put things on charts, as you can see. And so you'll be able to see these today. And one of those charts we looked at and actually finished in the 4th class, we took it all the way from the beginning, was this 8 strata of attainment of spirituality to give us an idea what success in spiritual life might look like, at least from the outside. And when we came up to the top of that chart, we had completed some very important teachings and filled ourselves in. You can see here that the 8 strata themselves, and this is pulled from the first 50 slokas of the Viveka Chudamani. That is the crest jewel of discrimination, a great scripture by Shankara. Probably his most well-known scripture. He wrote some 13, 14 scriptures. This great man who was enlightened by the time he was 10 and teaching graybeards in his teens and passed away at 32, he was an author of scriptures, which is very rare. There are good commentators on scriptures, and there are illumined souls who are beyond the scriptures sometimes, but it's very rare to see a soul who not only commentates on scriptures, but authors them too. And this is recent times. 700 AD is recent for India. When Shankara lived and his gurus lived, that is Govindapada and Gaudapada, the famous Gaudapada of non-dual fame, this was a resurrection of Vedanta. Buddhism had had its heyday and was disappearing behind the scenes again, and up came the Vedanta with Advaita Vedanta as the main watchword, and Shankara started resurrecting these great pinnacles of non-duality, and along with that began to compose these scriptures right out of his meditation. And we'll look at that in a new chart today that I actually put together 4 days ago and printed yesterday in Hilo so that I could bring it to you, so that you'll know what this whole hubbub about the scriptures in India is. The revealed scriptures, they're called. We'll get to that. But basically, they're scriptures of a non-dual nature that have to do with the relationship of the soul with divine reality or with God, soul and God. The lesser scriptures talk about nature and spirit. They talk about relativity, things that happen in your everyday life. They talk about your problems that you're having, like emotional problems nowadays would be a big one for people. But the non-dual scriptures don't go there at all. They just are really focused on that one main issue, if you will, or truism, if you see it in a different way, is the connection of the apparently individualized soul with the Supreme Being. That's how you would put it, so that you wouldn't step on any Vedantic feet or transgress any Vedic laws and non-dual laws. You see, the connection of the apparently individualized soul with the Supreme Being. So the soul is never actually individualized at all, is what they're saying. It just seems to be. So we'll take the seems to be on merit, you see. We'll just assume that our individuality, our ego and so forth is an assumption, is what they're saying, and that really we're one with Brahman all the time. Oneness is the nature of reality. There cannot be two or three or many. That's a Mayic projection, you see, of minds in ignorance. So that state of oneness, how to return to that, and that would be the ultimate success in spiritual life. Success and failure in spiritual life. So the failure in spiritual life would be not to recognize that. Recognition in Sanskrit, the word's called pratyabhigya, and it's a major word in Tantra too. That is, if you recognize this true nature within you, whether you would call it Atman or Buddha nature, however you'd speak of it, you would attain moksha, and you see strata of illumination, which Shankara would mean moksha or mukti, he's talking about. Then you would have this as a return path. You'd feel, like I say, like welcoming a friend after not seeing them for a long time. You'd return to this. And you see that in the great souls that have lived in this time. Like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was a good example of that, because he had so many kinds of samadhi right in view of the public and of people, the disciples. That was one of the great benefits of more recent avatar like him, is that you got to see so many samadhis and they were written down by good qualified souls that were around him. And then you didn't have to have any doubt anymore that there was such a thing as samadhi, because over the long march of time, people had lost track of the word, or even the concept that you could be in a non-dual state of mind. The mind being dual by nature, why would you think it could be ever non-dual? Why would the mind's eye ever become single, as Christ said, you see? If thine eye be single, you shall know the truth, right? But people are constantly living in duality, and that's their need, that's their natural state of being. So why would you ever suspect that all of a sudden you could have a non-dual vision, that I and my Father are one, for instance, or I am Atma Brahma, as they said it early on. So it actually would be sort of a rare occurrence that people would have that sort of remembrance again, the sort of divine memory of having been one with Brahman all the time. And then after that, you'd have to think, well, maybe I never was separate from Brahman, ever. Maybe there can't be any separation. Maybe the separation is an idea that's been foisted upon us by society and family and upbringing and so forth. And we fell into this deception, delusion around that. So when we looked at this whole chart, we started off, as you can see there, with that bottom box. Quickly, 3 great boons, a human birth, adept preceptor, and desire for freedom. 5 causes for lack of spiritual success: attachment, delusion, failure to awaken spiritually when the time comes upon you, taking refuge in spouse, wealth, and offspring instead of in God, and obsession with work and activity. Solutions for that: renounce your desires for everything but realization. Struggle, that's self-effort. That would be sadhana. Begin to practice. Take refuge in a path and a preceptor, a teacher and a path. Absorb yourself in love of truth. Devote yourself to the art of discrimination. That is, separate the wheat from the chaff. If you're a Christian, it's no different, really, in year 1 than it was 550 years prior to that in Buddha's case. You must practice the discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the actual and the non-actual, between the essence and the non-essence, however you'd want to put it. And then gain freedom from worldliness. Sri Ramakrishna said, worldliness is the chronic disease of this age. The problem nowadays is not evil, it's worldliness. Even evil beings have become worldly, so they're not problem anymore. So they've become deluded and hypnotized by objects, pleasure. So they just want those. So they're going to move towards possessing items and objects and having pleasures, and so worldliness, they become thoroughly worldly. And they're not, therefore, thinking in terms of otherworldliness. So like the kingdoms of heaven within, that would be otherworldly. My Father's mansion has many chambers, that would be otherworldly thinking. Thinking about, as somebody said before the class started, thinking about having a conscious death, conscious exit from the body, and what your sojourn inwardly is going to be like. If you've meditated upon that, on death and what's beyond death, bardos, if you want to put it in Tibetan Buddhist terms, then you've already envisioned what it might be like to leave your body. And so you have an advantage or a hand up over most other people who are in fear of death. Fear of death is one of the lowest of the 5 hells in yoga. Did you realize that? Patanjali's yoga states that there's 5 hells. First is called ignorance of your true nature. Second is called attachment. Third is called aversion. Fourth is called egotism. I'm not doing those in the correct order, but that's 4 of them. And then the 5th is called clinging to life, or fear of death. So if you've fallen into the 5th and lowest hell and you're fearing death, when you are eternally birthless and deathless soul, your soul is deathless, then you've fallen into the worst kind of predicament a soul can fall into, believing in the unbelievable, believing in death. Death is an illusion. There's a beautiful song I could sing you, and I probably will sing you some songs sometime today. Basically, this great devotee says, I have received a command from my divine mother of the universe that death must die. Therefore, I'm going to put death in its own grave today. Death must die. The idea of death must die in us, because we're birthless and deathless. Nam Ritur Nashanka Name Jati Beda Pita Naiva Me Naiva Mata Majanma is how he put it, Shankara, in his 6 verses on Nirvana. He says, Nam Ritur, I have no death, Ritur. Name Jati Beda, because I was never born. I have no father, Pita, I have no mother, Mata. And then he goes on to say, Chidananda Rupaha Shivaham Shivaham. Chidananda, I am the bliss of pure conscious awareness. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Shivaham, Shivaham. Aham means I. So that's the non-dual state of mind that this great soul is born with and passes from the body with. And so birth and death become minor considerations, you see. They're transitional states, and there's that word that has to come back again for us, apparent. It's an apparent death, it's an apparent birth. It's an apparent movement, too. The soul never moves, see. And it's not many. We're sharing it, you see. The bodies, the minds, they become multiple, you see, apparently so. But you cannot divide that undivided consciousness, which is Brahman. It's indivisible. That's why they call it that. It's one of the good words in English, indivisible or inseparable. So in that state of mind they live. So a little bit of more explication on this freedom from worldliness idea is that God is not in the world. The world is in God. That's how Vivekananda put it. There's your Advaitic koan. Think about that one for a while. God is not in the world. Have you ever found God here? You've been looking. But has anyone ever found God here? Because God is not nature, because God is not form. It's nameless and formless, so anywhere you look where there's a name or a form, you're going to have to say, Maya, Maya, samsara. I'm so sorry, samsara. I must reject you, you see. But the world is in God, so all is within you, right? Everything is within you. All knowledge is within you. Who said that? The father of yoga, Patanjali. Again, all knowledge is within you. And all of this is the outward form of it. Objects are your thoughts. You think, if you're in ignorance, then you think objects are made of matter. But if you're in realization, you know that that objects are made of thought. It's your own thinking process that's appearing before you as everything. Suns, worlds, beings, bodies. That's your own thought process manifest. Objects are just thought made concretized. That's how she put it, Holy Mother. So make that shift, you see, from all of this is matter to all of this is Brahman. And the bridge for that is all of this is thought vibration. All of this is the Word. In the beginning was the Word. See? So if I see that, and pratyabhikya, if I'm in constant recognition of it, it's not something I can think of once and forget. Like coming to this class, hearing the teachings and going, well, that was a good class, but now on to my life. See? You're going to have to take this in and drive it deep. Like a pylon into a mud at the bottom of a bay. You're going to build a big bay bridge. You're going to have to drive that pylon deep. Else, what happened recently is they began to, they weren't driven deep enough, they began to shift. So if you're a great architect, spiritually speaking, you're going to have to drive these teachings of the Dharma deep into the very riverbed of your mind, your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind, so that they will form a bridge for you to pass into non-dual reality when the time comes to leave the realm of dualities, multiplicity, projections, mental projections. So, freedom from worldliness, a lot to say about that, as Sri Ramakrishna had too. Then we went to the 5 signs of spiritual success: right action, correct discernment, knowledge of reality, non-reliance on physical and moral practices. We talked about that just before class today too. That physical practices and moral exercises are good to a point, but you can't rely on them, Shankara says. And the will to practice. I'll show you a quote about that soon. Then the 5 qualifications of knowledge. Get an illumined teacher. You must have intelligence developed in you. Daksha, they call it in Tantra. You must have a desire to learn. That is not just the aparavidya, math, science, arts, so forth, but the paravidya. You must have a desire to learn the highest truth. You must develop a capacity for it, so that some of my students here, that the camera, the live streaming audience doesn't see, sit like this and listen to me for 3 hours. That's a good start. See? Mm-hmm. Listen to someone talk on and on for 3 hours without shifting. Then you're just beginning to develop a capacity. See? Sure, they might come up afterwards and said, I didn't understand 80% of what you said. I said, that's all right, that 20% is a good start, you see. And then pretty soon you'll want to sit like this for days, you see. You should be able to establish your posture. And your posture is not just physical, it's also here, isn't it? Mental posture first, and then your body will obey. People are trying to master their physical posture, and then they're having trouble with their minds later. But that's not the way the seers do it. They come into the body with a controlled mind, mastered mind, and then their body obeys them and their senses obey them. It's a whole different trajectory, you see, that when you're looking at an illumined soul and the way they consider life and embodiment and so forth. Yes, it's unreal. The soul doesn't move. So I'm going to have the most economy possible when I project a body and withdraw it. See, projecting and withdrawing all the time. So Buddha sat this way for what, 49 days was it? See, Christ in the wilderness sat this way for many days, you see, when he had samadhi. So if you want to see yourself, you might want to establish a posture that's going to make you immovable, static, stationary, for as long as possible. As long as it takes your mind to settle down so you can see the light again. Because all activity, as he's saying here, you see, this problem with activity is one of the great impediments. Then you become habitually active. What happened to inaction? See, you read the Gita, Krishna's talking right away to Arjuna, inaction. See, very few people learn that art. There's karma, akarma, and vikarma, Krishna says in the Gita. So there's what not to do, what to do, and then how you must learn how not to do anything. It's the doing that causes karma, right? So if you stay in a state of non-doing, then you won't cause any karma. You won't build any karma. So then there's this amazing thing that the illumined souls do where they can do without doing. See, that economy I was just talking about. So they can actually engage in actions without accruing any karma. My teacher used to say that's like a bird flies through the air but leaves no trace. See? Or somebody walks across, a great master martial artist like him, walks across rice paper but doesn't leave a wrinkle, you see. So you don't leave any trace behind. It was the name of my teacher, Sheshananda. It means the bliss of leaving no residue behind after. No residue. Nothing will bring me back here again. I'm gone and gone forever, which was Buddha's way of describing it. Have no hope for me for the world forevermore. I'm gone and gone forever. So Might send back some of my emanations, but I'm not coming back. I saw it. I saw through it. And it's a ruse. It's a wool pulled over the eyes. And now I want the truth, and I want the truth to set me free. And I'll live in that. Whether I'm embodied or disembodied, I'll live in that. You see, it's a past master we're talking about there, not just a master. These are great souls. Now, if you followed that, and we're coming up current here in a minute, then we looked at the 4 qualifications for seeking Brahman. Viveka, desirelessness, tranquility, and longing for freedom. Then we looked at the 4 treasures and the 6 jewels. Remember those? Sadhana Chatustaya, they're called, the 6 treasures, the 4 treasures and the 6 jewels are called. Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhana, Shraddha, those, remember? And then finally you get a true desire for freedom. That's called mumukshutvam. Mumukshutvam. You finally get a desire to be free. Something that will stick. Not just I think I'll be free today. Oh, I failed. You see. Not success and failure in spiritual life. That is even beyond that duality. So then we went to the 4 qualifications of a teacher, how your teacher must be Stotriya, that is, must know the essence of the scriptures and be able to transmit them to you. A teacher must be Kamahata, have no desire for you except that you reach enlightenment. A teacher must be a Brijana, live a pure and unostentatious life. And a teacher must be a knower of Brahman. God and I are like that. And then you have a Brahmavitta. So you have a teacher who has those 4 qualifications. You can fall at his feet or her feet. Then you have a great teacher, you see. And then there are some 7 stages of higher wisdom that teachers qualify themselves with, that take them from Brahmavid to Brahmavittama, from Brahmavittama to Brahmavidvaraya, from Brahmavidvaraya to Brahmavidvarishta, as they accumulate these mastery over these inner states. Sort of like the 10 bhumis of Buddhism. You know, the Bodhisattva, they have 10 lands, 10 pure lands. If you become a Bodhisattva, you've attained the first one. I have a chart on it. And then you start to attain mastery of your Buddha nature more and more. You ascend to these inner lands. Pretty soon you're a master of all 10 bhumis, grounds. That's a beautiful teaching of Buddhism. So, like that, there are these levels of qualification that that you can test the teacher with, and we hadn't through the 60s. We didn't test our teachers. Coming from India, even in Christianity, we didn't test teachers, and so many of them let us down. See, and failed the higher qualifications. But then we heard from Shankara finally. Vivekananda brought us to Vivekachudamani. We read it. Found, there's the 4 qualifications. I wish we had had those back in the 60s, you see. Now, 5 attributes for approaching the Guru: devotion, humility, love, service, inquiry into reality. And right there at the inquiry into reality is called Atma Vichara. And we know that was the case with Ramana Maharshi in present times. His path proceeded mostly via Atma Vichara. Who am I was the question, right? Now we look back millennia, we see that same Atma Vichara was a part of Yoga, Lord Vashishta's teachings. In Yoga Vashishta, you'll find it. So those are the 2 bookends of Atma Vichara, inquiry into the nature of the true self. Vashishta at one end of time, and Ramana Maharshi most current. So in between there, the Indian Dharma and the teachings of the scriptures are always holding up this need for the soul to inquire into the nature of reality. We've torn our hair and been born and died many times looking into the nature of relativity. How many of us have looked into the nature of reality and realized it? Very few souls, see. And those are the ones that we follow. Those are the ones we admire. Those are the luminaries, and the ones that are the founders of the great religions and so forth, stopped and turned away from relativity and took a good, strong, deep look at reality. And that question, who am I, is one of the ways in which you can do that. Of course, it's not enough just to ask the question, who am I? It's not a matter of just who am I, it's a matter of what you are not. See, when you say, who am I, and the answer comes forth, I am Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman, then everything else that is the non-self is going to have to be shorn away. Shorn away. Earth, air, fire, water, ether, touching, tasting, hearing, smelling, seeing, the tanmatras in a dream tonight, the subtle elements, the fourfold mind, the ego, thoughts, Buddha, Buddhi, intelligence, and so forth, all the way up to the Mahat, cosmic mind, shorn away. I have none of those things because those are changing stations and mechanisms. Those are all found inside the realm of name and form. There's only one thing that's outside the realm of name and form, and that's Brahman, or Allah, or Almighty Father. So I'm going to have to base my search for my Atmic inquiry on uncovering that. Taking all the layers, stripping away all the levels, of Maya. And I'm going to have, it's an inward work. So you're doing this inward in your mind. This is why you need to be able to sit quietly for a while to do this. Settle yourself. Settle your body, settle your senses, settle your mind. And look then with that peaceful mind that I started the class talking about today. Look inside for a while. If you do it in the wilderness or do it under the bo tree, wherever you do it, you're going to have to come to grips with the distinction between reality and relativity. The wheat and the chaff. It's been known through all the religions that this is what you need to do. Viveka is what it's called in Vedanta, and that's why Swamiji took his name when he came here, Swami Vivekananda. He was calling himself Satchidananda before he left India. Then when he came to the West, he must have said, what do they need there? Like any good culture, and most cultures that are overactive, like the West is, they're going to need to discriminate between the real and the unreal. So I'll name myself Vivekananda, and I'll go there and teach them this art of discrimination. So that is where we left off last week, is we bridged inquiry into reality, and we looked at these three great sources in a chart that I think had all the secrets of the scriptures. Do you remember that chart? I didn't bring it today to show you, but we had the three great sources in that, and we had the three ways of analyzing the scriptures, and we had the four opinions into the origin of the scriptures. All those things we looked at last week. Now, when we looked at the origin of the scriptures, there was an opinion that it just comes about by the intellects of man. That's the fourth and lowest opinion of the scriptures. Oh, they just occurred to the intellects of man, and man writes them down. Then you go back in involution style, and you look at the next one, and you say, well, actually, no, it comes from the minds of the realized souls. And then you go back and you think, oh, actually, it came from Ishvara first. Then that was given to them, to the illumined souls, by Ishvara. Ishvara means the chosen ideal, means the great soul, like Krishna in India. Ishvara would be that chosen ideal. So it comes from the mind of Ishvara down and filters down into the intellects of mankind at different levels. But then the fourth, or you'd say probably the fourth in order, but the first in origin, means that those scriptures never had an origin. And it's one of the great secrets of non-dual reality called Advaita Vedanta, is that nothing has an origin. We're stuck in this idea of cycles, beginnings, middles, and ends. Time has a beginning, middle, and end. Space has a beginning, middle, and end. Look into science and so forth. So why shouldn't scriptures also have a beginning, middle, and end? They get composed, they see the light of day for a while, printed page and so forth, and then they disappear and nobody remembers it anymore. But here they are coming back on us again all the time. So the soul begins to think that maybe I should look beyond origins. Maybe everything is in cycles, and therefore there must be an all-abiding, changeless, that is, immutable substratum that lies beyond all change. And that's where my peace lies. And that's where my bliss lies. That's where my realization is, or should be. And that's eternal. See? So beyond Ishvariya and Archa and Paurusheya is this idea called Aparusheya, that all the scriptures are eternal. And all they do is, like everything else, come forward for a while and then disappear from us, and then come forward again and disappear from us in cycles. And the truths are always the same. So that's what we talked about in terms of these great sources. Now, I promised you a look at this new chart because of the four stations of how people consider the guru, the teachings. Then we look at this chart, which I put together for you, so it will sort of give you a good ability to seek wisdom of the scriptures of the eternal. Now, this is in accord, because I'm throwing this at you both at once, but since we finished this chart of Shankara's, and we're looking back to Lord Vashishta's chart, which is millennia old, on this supreme pathway to the eternal moksha. Now, Vashishta puts it that the very first step on the path is, of the sincere seeker, is that he must know the difference between the Atmagyan scriptures and the ordinary scriptures. So even back in Vashishta's time, there were more common ordinary scriptures that were more fundamentalist or more dualistic. And he said that you must, to start the path, you must know the difference between those ordinary scriptures and the revealed scriptures. Shastra is the word in India. And the revealed scriptures are going to, again, as I said, deal with the fact of the apparently individualized soul and its relationship with Brahman. That's the only thing they're considering. They don't care about anything else. They don't care how good or bad your life is going. They don't care about how many planets there are in the skies or how to reach them physically. All of those things that are in the lower wisdom or Paravidya, they're Xing out of the equation. They're bringing forward this one great question: who am I? What is my relationship with reality? Because if I know that, then all the rest of this will be known. That was according to the rishis of India, the greatest question ever asked was when one of the young students came forward and said, "Teach me that one thing by knowing which all else is known." And all the rishis saluted him and said, "Oh, that's the best question we've ever heard." Because they were really into questioning back then, you see, Atmavichara. Any question that had to do with removing Maya, removing blocks and obstacles and impediments from the way and seeing the truth, that's what they were about. And they would spend hours and hours doing that. They would start at sunset, like in King Dasaratha's court, talk all night while the moon rose and set about the nature of reality and the spiritual path. And all of a sudden they would see the sun coming up, and they didn't even know that 8-10 hours had passed, and they had spent their whole time discussing the fine points of spiritual progress, spiritual path. And they did that every night. They met all the time in King Dasaratha's court. That's back in the time of Sri Ram. You'd read that in the Yoga Vishishta scripture, how they would meet and discuss those matters. So this one thing was always at the foundation of it. What is my relationship with Supreme Reality? What's the relationship of this apparently individualized soul with the Supreme Soul? I want to find the answer to that. If I know the answer to that, everything else will be known. How many universes there are, how many planets are in the sky, how to reach the sun, how to understand. Everything else becomes known by that one thing. Knowing Brahman, in other words. Knowing yourself. Know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So with that as a sort of preamble, and taking this first entry here, the greater is the science of divine wisdom, while the lesser treats only terrestrial knowledge. Lord Vashishta says. The divine wisdom is what you want to move towards, and the terrestrial knowledge you want to move away from. Get thee behind me. Because that's what you've been spending lifetime studying, and it hasn't gotten you realization yet. You're just spinning your wheels in a sense. But if you were to come to know this divine wisdom, then all these obstacles that we just talked about would turn into ways of pathways for seeing higher truth. Your husband would become divine, your wife would become divine, your children would become divine, your life would become dharmic. All your activities would change from restless to balanced, and you'd start to understand this bliss that these seers are always experiencing all the time. You'd actually begin to experience some of it for yourself. See, some of that amrit, those drops of nectar, would actually become yours. And then you'd wake up one day, as one songwriter says, "This morning I woke up and my delusion was gone, gone, utterly gone." Who can veil the truth, he says? Who can keep a blazing fire tied in a cotton cloth? So he had this epiphany, this moment of absolute awakening to the nature of reality, and that his doubts were gone, gone, utterly gone from then on. So, ignorance is unreal. Therefore, how can it cause you any doubt? That comes from the scripture of Avadhuta Gita. You see, right here. Avadhuta says, "Pramadina na sandeyaha kim karishan nivrittiman. Utpajante vilayante buddhischa yata jale." He says, ignorance is unreal. How can it cause you any real doubt then? All the projections of my mind, all I need to do is dissolve them back like bubbles into water every day. Everything my mind projects, I assess it, I withdraw it back, and I dissolve it back into the ocean of consciousness. And if I do that every day, that's my practice. That's the practice of the Avadhuta. And then everything that gets dissolved back means all your potential karmas from actions you did and from thoughts you had get dissolved back in every day. So you're purifying the mind every day of its projection process. Sankalpa, vikalpa. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita, there's a great evil, a positive evil in your mind. It's called sankalpa and vikalpa. Projection of the mind. Projection of all the worlds in time and space in name and form by the mind, out of desire, vikalpa. Get rid of that, Arjuna, and you'll be free. He's telling him this on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, poised between two armies, you see. Get rid of your sankalpa, vikalpa tendency and be free. So that means projection of mind. So Avadhuta says, yes, your mind will project things. You can't really stay in non-dual samadhi all the time, can you? Or your body will disappear. So since your mind projects them, just make sure you withdraw all the projections back every day in meditation and dissolve them like bubbles in water. Buddhischa yata jale. Jale means water. So this is one of the results of Atmavichara, that you understand these abstruse truths. They're both profound and simple at the same time. They're so simple we overlook them. They're so profound that we don't look into them. So we take this to task then, and this is one of the things which Lord Vashishta says you must start off with. Know the difference between revealed scriptures and ordinary scriptures. So let's look what I put together for you in terms of that, in this new chart. Now, this chart is called Mother India's Revealed Scriptures on Earth. I began calling it just Mother India's Revealed Scriptures. But then I thought, well, this image with the feet coming down out of the skies lends itself really well to how the scriptures made their way to earth, which is why I was telling you about those four ways in which they interpret the scriptures. One, just the intellect of man. The other, the intellects of of higher souls, see, or 3 Ishvara, or 4, they don't have an origin, which is the highest opinion of all. They're beginningless, middleless, and endless. See? They exist all the time. It's just a matter of whether you can keep track of them. See? You bring them back with you every lifetime, then you're born with the knowledge of the scriptures, like Shankara was, and that's why he knew all the Indian scriptures by the time he was 8. How could that be possible otherwise? To know all of this that I could list here, plus more, by the time he's 8, how would that be possible unless he had mastered it in a previous lifetime? So there are a lot of implications to that kind of reasoning. Now, we'll get to the on earth later. Let's look at, and this is really where you can pick up your pens and papers. I usually advise people who take notes to just listen to my words. Do you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? See? Get the transmission, you see. And then, put your pens and papers down. Maybe write something later. Write certain things down you need to write down. But in this case, I'd say, here's where you can pick up your pens and papers, because all of this listed here below this line, in the middle of the chart, shows us something that I've always said, is that in most religions there's one great book and one great prophet, or one great savior. But in India, there are dozens and hundreds of each. And this is the remarkable thing about Mother India, why we look back to her not only as the cradle of civilization, which is arguable because other people have different opinions about that, but definitely to the source of non-dual scriptures. So many of them, you see, so many revealed scriptures. So let's look into them. You could write them down, because I can tell you this is what my life since 19 years old has been about, studying these. This is my list. This is what you'll find in my library if you come to my home. I'm not saying that I've read every one of these cover to cover. Many of them I have. Then many of others I've studied. Many others I've offered in retreat. And others I've just sampled from, like Shankara's. I haven't read all of Shankara's 14, but most of them I have. I've taught several of them in retreat. So, but this is generally a basic list of what you could find in English, because we're looking at that so many scriptures haven't been taken into English yet. Like, it's hard to find a good English translation, say, of the Tantras, 64 Tantras of India. That's difficult, you see. And then when you find one, maybe it's not all that reliable. It hasn't been checked out by authoritative source, and so you don't know what you're getting. So you do have that language barrier. But basically you could say, you have to start here with the Prasthanatrayam, the 108 Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras. That's India in scriptural. That's the 3 great landmarks of scriptural history, they call it, Prasthanatrayam. So Bhagavad Gita, of course, probably, show of hands, many people in this room would have read it. And maybe some of you even studied it with a teacher and so forth. 108 Upanishads, probably in the West, we might have read 11 of them. Because the 11 are which Shankara commented on in 700 AD. He didn't have time in his 32-year-old lifetime to comment on all 108, but he did take 11 of them and commented on them, and they've become standard major Upanishads now. Katha Upanishad, Svetashvatara Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, Ishavasya Upanishad, Kena Upanishad. These are, some of them, thin. You could read them in 10 minutes if you just read straight through them. Of course, you're going to want to take slokas and contemplate on them, because they are concentrated, non-dual statements. They're like koans in Zen, as we were saying. So, Prasthanatrayam, something you could verse yourself in the Vedanta. And not only just the Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita takes you into some of the tantric levels of India. Vaishnavism, for instance. That is how the teachings of Krishna are accepted as the authority in India. And, there are many different English translations now of the Gita possible to read in English. And everyone might have their favorite. But there are also ones that have been accompanied by commentaries, like say Shankara has been a great commentator on the Gita. Now, so that probably would start with that, so I put it close. Now, on the other side here you have these four. I put them together because they have a very, if you were talking about revealed scriptures, these are probably the ones that you'll get the best idea of what I mean by this, by the term revealed scriptures, if you look into those. They're, how to say, all the fat trimmed off the bone. They're just pure non-dualism. You can't really find anything there that's a teaching. It's just more of a statement of truth. It's not like they're going to tell you how to practice. Some of these other scriptures might do that. But those are just going to say truth, 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 truth. You'll pick them up. Like I just chanted, one of them, ignorance is unreal, therefore how can it cause any real doubt? So they're declaring avidya to be unreal. And so you start off in that premise. And if avidya, ignorance is unreal, then it won't be able to cause you any doubt. So why are you doubting? Why are you passing time in your life doubting things? Doubt is one of the 4 elements or 3 elements of the curtain of nations. That is ignorance, doubt, and fear. Those are the 3 primal contents to the curtain of nations, which is keeping you from seeing your deep sleep state tonight. You go into dream, you remember a little of that. But you go into deep sleep, you don't remember any of that, right? So there's a curtain of nations there that you're bouncing up against. You're having profound experiences in dream, but when you come back, you've forgotten them all. And that's basically because of ignorance, doubt, and fear. Like fear of being formless would be one of the profound levels of fear in the curtain of nations. You have a chance to go formless consciously, you don't take it, because you have your body waiting for you back in the waking state. See? So you give up that opportunity. But at one time when you go into deep sleep very sattvically, like you're very balanced, you're in a balanced cycle, all of a sudden you'll have the experience of formlessness, and you'll see something, and you'll come back with something profound. Oh, I had a great vision of a bearded fellow who was telling me something very profound about my life and so forth, you see. So you have these profound dreams and so forth that you could bring back out of that dreaming state, slapna it's called. So all of this has to do with these direct statements that can rid you of some of these doubts and fears that you're carrying, that are unnecessary baggage for the mind. Again, when you have peace of mind, all of a sudden you feel so like it's a welcome back. So you welcome a friend that you haven't seen for a long time. You just feel like you're back to square one again, and all that you did was just a sojourn, and so much of it was futile. So much of what you suffered, so much of what you had to forbear in life, after life even, is all of a sudden lifted off you, and you just feel buoyant. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. Your mind shouldn't be like rainwater, he said. Rainwater seeks the lowest place to settle. Your mind should be like a hot air balloon. You see, its thoughts always buoyant, always moving upward, inward. So that's a good description. One of his stories, his analogies about a person who feels totally, all those weights have been lifted off. And they're just naturally buoyant all the time. See it? So they're going to be open to spiritual suggestion if they have that weightless mind. Otherwise not. They're going to be open to all sorts of insinuations from the 6 passions and the 8 fetters and so forth. So you have to sort of meditate on the difference between that. What is it like to have a weighty mind? And what would it be like, or what is it like when I have a very buoyant mind? And that's sort of a mental posture. You can put yourself in physical postures, hundreds and thousands of them, but they won't give you enlightenment, Shankara says. But if you can get this right mental attitude, right orientation, Buddha called it in the Eightfold Path, right perspective, if you can start off with that, then everything from then on that you take in the spiritual path is a benefit to you. otherwise not. Everything you take into the spiritual path otherwise, without that right perspective, is a source for confusion, for misunderstanding. And you have to ponder, and you're not getting anywhere. Father of Yoga calls that one step forward, two steps back. That's a seven-syllable Sanskrit word. Alabdha bhumikatva, or anavasti tattvani. Those are spiritual problems that mean I can't make any spiritual progress. I have a sense of failure every time I look into my spiritual life. Or I'm taking one step forward and two steps back. Those are actual tendencies in the human mind that Father of Yoga put his finger on for us and gave him words and then taught them in the Yoga Sutras. One of the 9 antaryayas. Antaryaya means impediment to yoga. Yoga just means yourself, union with yourself. It just means I'm back to square one. I'm one with Brahman. And Brahman isn't outside me, where I've been looking, unfortunately, for so many lifetimes. I just came back to myself, right? We hear it all the time. There's a story about, I think it was Bhushundi, it was a crow in this scripture, you see, where he angers Ram, and so he flies everywhere. So he's a very clever crow. So he's trying to get away from God, and Ram is like angered, right? So he flies everywhere. He even flies into different worlds, other worlds, trying to escape Ram. Finally, Ram catches up with him. See, it's like in Christianity, what's it called? The hound of heaven is after you see. Out of heaven, so you can't get away, right? So finally Ram catches up with Bhushundi, and Bhushundi goes, oh no, here we go, this is it, you see. And Ram grabs him, puts him in his mouth, and Bhushundi wakes up in his own nest. All that sojourn, all that fear, all that movement, just to find out that he should have never left his own nest. In other words, God is within, Kingdom of Heaven was within. And so it sounds very simple, but when you're being drawn out by antaryayas or kleshas or passions or fetters or karmas or samskaras or the tendency to enter into sankalpa and vikalpa, mental projections, and you get caught up in all that, it's not simple at all. It's very complex and confusing. So the scriptures are there, revealed scriptures particularly, to help you out of that. So let's look at those 4. Ashtavakra Samhita. Ashtavakra means bent in several places. Ashtavakra was the man who composed that. So when he was in his mother's womb, his father was reciting Sanskrit outside in the world. And all of a sudden a voice came out of his mother's womb saying, Father, you're mispronouncing that Sanskrit. You better get a teacher. And his father was furious. He says, I curse you. You will be born deformed. And so he was born bent, Ashtavakra, in several places. And, well, I can't leave it at that, can I? I have to tell you the end of the story. Is that his father was sent to prison for some crime, and Ashtavakra got him out of prison, and so his father removed the curse, and he straightened up. So anyway, happy ending. But the main point of this is that Ashtavakra became an illumined soul and gave us the scripture. Now this is the only book that Sri Ramakrishna would allow near him. He wasn't into book learning, as you can tell. Not that he wasn't into you learning the scriptures. He just had seen the pundits get into their books and had sacrificed realization, had put ritual in the place of realization, basically. Happens with every religion. Too much ritual, not enough direct experience. The ritual isn't used to get to experience. It's used for ritual. Shastra Anuvartanam is called. People are born into the world for desire for religious ceremonials. Whole cross sections of them. And so they're going to stay in the ceremonials and they're not going to get to true spiritual experience. Aparokshanubhuti, direct spiritual experience, was one of the last things we studied last week. So, Ashtavakra Samhita Sri Ramakrishna loved that recited out loud. So he told the young Naren, that's the future Vivekananda, Narendra, when he was a teenager with the master. He told him one day, read the Ashtavakra Samhita to me. So Naren got it out, start reading. He said, oh, this is nonsense. Everything is God. The book is God. The spoon is God. I don't like this. See? So Sri Ramakrishna said, never mind, just go on reading. So Swamiji, the young Naren, went on reading the Ashtavakra Samhita, and pretty soon he just, later on, let's say, he said, this is my special thing. See, the non-duality, Advaita Vedanta is the greatest. This non-dual reality that seems so simple and but is so profound. If you meditate on it, removes all those weights, all those considerations of the mind, all these projections, all these impediments, and your spiritual life will then have that success that it's missing. One step forward, two step back fashion. You see, you'll actually start to make progress, and you'll start to feel like yourself again. Sri Ramakrishna, said, the world is either a prison house of suffering or it's a mart of joy. Depends on how your mind is, right? Either a prison house of suffering or a mart of joy, he said. But he said, here I can eat, drink, and be merry. So this is a fine place. He liked the world. But at the same time, he was calling it unreal, full of suffering, problematic, to the max, as they say. So how could these two exist side by side, in one person? So he had that state of consciousness which could manage that kind of duality and turn it into non-duality. So Ashtavakra Samhita, one of the great non-dual scriptures of India, everyone should read it. It's just, get ready, it's not commentary, and there's not a lot there. You just start reading, and it's just statement of truth after statement of truth. It's one right after the other. Same with the Avadhuta Gita, which I already chanted a sloka for you out of that. Avadhuta Gita, the song of the Avatut, basically. I liked it so much, and I researched the lineages of the Avadhuts and found out who they were, and then wrote my book, 24 Teachers of the Avadhut in Nature, which you can get here at our SRV shelves, and read about how the Avadhut went everywhere and saw divine reality in everything. Like if he saw an arrow maker working on fletching the arrows, you see, and a parade went by, and the Avadhut didn't even look up. The arrow maker didn't even look up from his task, even though this beautiful parade was passing by with elephants and clowns and marriage ceremony and everything. So the Avadhut, watching the arrow maker, said, I see you have perfect concentration. You're my teacher of concentration. You're my dharana yoga teacher. See, so he saluted him, you see, because he wasn't distracted from his task, even with all of the reasons to be distracted. And, so he took 24 of those kinds of teachers in nature. That's a beautiful teaching in the Srimad Bhagavatam, I think, or Uddhava Gita, part of it too. Uddhava Gita is where you find it. So the 24 teachers in nature of the Avadhut, that is one of the great teaching that I think would interest most people, because it has that story-like content to it. See how the Avadhut actually looked at a spider and what he saw, how he looked at the Brahmarakita and what he saw, how he looked at the courtesan, what he saw in her, and how he looked at different aspects of life, and the elephant and so forth, and how the teaching he got out of each of those things. All there in the Uddhava Gita, but the Avadhut themselves, that's his prime non-dual teacher, Avadhuta Gita, or teaching, scripture. The other one we've looked at is Adhyatma Ramayana. Now there is the Ramayana, and that probably is listed here, see it, Ramayana, in this longer list of scriptures. But the Adhyatma Ramayana is the non-dual version of the Ramayana. Ramayana is quite copious. So the Adhyatma Ramayana is slimmed down to just the non-dual teachings that are found in the Ramayana. And I find that in the Ramayana, Sri Ram is called the perfect man, son of King Dasaratha, so forth, so on. But in the Advaita Ramayana, they're focusing on him as the avatar, as the knower of truth. So the Ramayana, you would maybe know that Ram is the avatar. But in the Advaita Ramayana, they're actually pointing out the fact that this is God incarnate. And what he says is absolute truth. So you'll find it's slimmed down, easier to read in content, not so voluminous. And you'll find many of his discourses to Sita, his divine consort, to Hanuman, the monkey god who loved him, and to his brother Lakshmana are found there, slimmed down in the Advaita Ramayana. There are copies out here of it too in our library. The founder of SRV, Lex Hickson, was my great friend and mentor. He handed me that book in India once. Said, "Here, Babaji, I just read this. You read it." Advaita Ramayana. So I read that and was very grateful to have been exposed to it. Now I had to put Gaudapada's Karika there. I don't know if you would call it a scripture. It's just cut a place for itself in non-dual wisdom, because it's on one of these 108 Upanishads called the Mandukya Upanishad that Gaudapada made his famous commentary on it that changed the thinking of Western people, Western philosophers. Whether they believed him or not, they all had to admit it was ingenious what he proposed in terms of commentary on the word Om first is how he starts out. The A-U-M. A is waking state, U is dreaming state, M is deep sleep state. The A is Brahma, the U is Vishnu, the M is Shiva. The A is the gross world, the U is the inner world, and M is the transcendent world. All the different associations of the word Om, A-U-M, in its Triputi type of teaching, and what they mean, all explained in 12 slokas in the Mandukya Upanishad. You can read that in 2 minutes. That's a whole Upanishad you're reading. But Gaudapada then took those 12 slokas and expanded it into 4 padas, 4 different sections, and commented on everything that was in it, including Maya, his firebrand pada. The section about the firebrand is very great, about how you wave a stick with a spark on the end of it at night, and you see this tracer, and it's not really there, but you're seeing how your eyes can't really follow that, so it's seeing something that's not there. So he takes analogies like that, like, say, man running a race in a dream. That's how he describes people living in ignorance. You're running a race in a dream. You drink water, you get tired, you win a trophy, but you wake up in your bed and no trophy, and so forth. So he uses analogies like that to describe the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state of people. And these are the inner worlds, actually, you're visiting every night, but you don't know it yet, because you're so attached to the waking state as being reality that you're not looking at the dreaming and deep sleep state as levels of consciousness. That's where the kingdoms of heaven are, within you, in your dreaming and deep sleep states. Deep sleep state begins to go formless. So that's your doorway into Brahman, which is supreme formlessness. So he's beginning to bring out these teachings that have been hidden for millennia about kings of heaven are within you. See, or all knowledge lies within you. Basically, that's literal. You should be taking that as these are your states of consciousness inside, but you're so habituated to the waking state as being real, matter as being real, time out here as being real, space as being real, name and form as being real. Even when quantum physics has shown you that it's all just vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second, you still think it's real, real, real. And you can't let go of your grasp on objects, which are made of atomic particles. And you're fearing death. You're fearing that death will take you away from things that you assume to be real in the waking state, when death is only going to transition you into dream state, deep sleep state, or maybe into samadhi if you're ready for it. You see, just your true nature. You'll just see the light when you die. Why not? Or you'll see the darkness, and that's even better, because that's Kali. She's blacker than black. She's like the black hair in which all the black bumblebees of the souls fly into and immerse themselves, you see. Beautiful songs about blackness, radiant blackness in India. But whatever the case may be, this is being proposed to you in some of these great scriptures, and Gaudapada takes it apart and shows you AUM as in accordance with your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. See? Now you're beginning to understand what Christ said back then, which Peter and John and others couldn't understand, you see. So they didn't have that grounding in that kind of scripture. See? Where were the scriptures at that time? The Old Testament? If you've gone through the Old Testament, where's the wisdom? See? I don't want to hear about who owned what tent peg thousands of years before, in some family that's not the relationship between the individual, apparently individualized soul and Brahman. Where's the teachings about that? Well, if you go into the Song of Moses, you'll find him talking about non-duality in a few of these verses, but very hard to find otherwise. So, unless you're going by way of inference, it's very difficult to find non-duality in many religious scriptures. It's probably there in the religions, but in the religious scriptures, you're going to have to go to India, and you'll find out that the revealed scriptures are the thing. They're one of the three great sources. Human birth, a good teacher in the scriptures, if you've got that, now just get your mind on your side, and you'll have enlightenment in that very lifetime. That's the way they think. But missing any of those, then Vishisha says it's like trying to grow crops only at night. If you try and reach God without any of those, it's like trying to grow crops only at night. Those are the great lights, the great sources. So they're very, very serious about scriptures. But it has to be revealed scriptures that talk about this relationship between God and mankind, and does away with the line of demarcation between God and mankind. See, this is called duality, right? Advaita is that man exists and God exists as two separate realities. The Advaitas are not going to accept that. You're going to have to remove that line more and more until we find out that mankind is God walking around on two legs. And there's where your peace is going to be. There's where your bliss is going to be. There's where your enlightenment is going to be. And that's the death of death. You'll make fear afraid of itself. You'll make doubt doubt itself. And you'll put death in its own grave. So this is what these four scriptures will do for you if you start reading them and begin to take them in at the level in which they're intended to be absorbed. So you take them in on your own and with a teacher and in classes and so forth. You'll have this feeling of buoyancy again. Your mind will be free of all these weighty considerations of fundamentalism or dualism and so forth. That's the benefit, and one of the rare benefits of studying Advaita Vedanta, or Zen Buddhism is also a very non-dual form of Buddhism. These are the more non-dual sides of Indian religion. Buddhism, of course, is an Indian religion too. I think we've run out of time here, so let's take a break here. We'll come back and finish this list of scriptures. And live stream audience can look at this chart while we're taking our prasad here, our blessed food, sanctified food. And we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Namaste.
Namaste.
We at the SRV associations here in Hawaii welcome you back to the second half and the final half of the fifth class and final class of this series called Success and Failure in Spiritual Life. We've made our way in these great two charts that we've taken up, one by Shankara and one by Lord Vashishta, through a series of teachings that you can see how in-depth the Dharma is in India. And of course this is just the tip of the iceberg. As is the case with these scriptures too, we see that even though I've made a copious list here we've been going through, that there are even more that could be listed, but these are the ones that, along with having an English translation for the most part, are the most prominent, and that's been shown in terms of the three great landmarks in spiritual history, and then these four non-dual scriptures. I didn't want to spend very much time on this because it's just a list that you can then introduce yourself to them by reading them yourself. There are, in Vedanta Society libraries and in SRV's library, there are many of these great scriptures. Now, there's a whole other set of books, like say Vivekananda's Complete Works, that actually I did list that here though. Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda is a more current thing, and of course the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which is a testament everyone should read who's interested in authentic spirituality in this day and age. Those are more contemporary scripture, if you will, like the four yogas by Vivekananda. Everyone would want to pick those up: Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Raja Yoga, which is the 8-limb system that he commented on in a very simple way to guide us through it in the West. So there are many other scriptures that you can count in books by spiritual biographies that I, of course, am not including here. But as far as finishing up this list, we can see that when we've looked at these two sets on either side, there's right in the middle here the mother scriptures, and I think they're extremely important because you don't really have any mother scriptures in the world. India is the only religion and the only place that you will find scriptures that are dedicated specifically to Divine Mother of the Universe. Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and the Chandi being those two. You'll find mentions of goddesses and like Mother Mary and other iconic presences of Divine Mother here and there, looked at in different ways by different scholars and pundits and priests. But here you'll find India accepting straight out in the lineage of Shaktism, for instance, Shakti, Divine Mother, these two great scriptures. Srimad Devi Bhagavatam is voluminous, very thick, hundreds and hundreds of pages. A lot of stories in it, but it also has many, many great teachings straight from the mouth of the Devi, Sri Devi, or Bhagavati, Durga Devi, they call her, or Kali, or Tara, those kinds of divine names. And so we should bring those up. The Chandi is some 700 mantras, probably more currently read than the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam because it's much shorter and easier to read. Those two should be mentioned in terms of Indian scriptures if you're interested in the wisdom of the mother. Now, these other three blocks here we can go through: 4 Vedas, the 18 Puranas, the 64 Tantras. Those are divided up, I think, in 3, because you'll have the Shaiva. They're also called Agamas. You'll have the Shaiva Agamas. You'll have the Shiva's words, Vishnu Agamas, Vishnu's words, and then Shakti Agamas, Divine Mother's words again. So you'll find more Divine Mother teachings there in the 64 Tantras. Many very incredible practices too that you can engage in if you find out from the 64 Tantras. Then there's the Ramayana, which we mentioned in terms of conjunction with the Adhyatma Ramayana. That's the whole epic about Sita and Ram and Hanuman and Lakshmana and Ravana, the great evil, and how Ram dealt with it in this beautiful epic story that's very famous. The Mahabharata is until recent times was the longest literary work in existence. You'll find, for instance, the Bhagavad Gita here came out of the Mahabharata. It was buried there in one of the chapters, and so somebody culled it out in this long sweep of time, and it became its own scripture. Mahabharata, really, to understand the Gita and some of the things that happen in the Bhagavad Gita, like the Kurukshetra war and why Krishna is advising Arjuna to fight instead of be peaceful, and all these things that are potential areas of, and have become in some of the commentators' minds, areas for contention, are really explained if you know it in the context of the Mahabharata, how everything led up to the war and what happened after the war. Really, the Mahabharata is India's rich lore of and heritage of stories about saints and seers and kings and royalty and beggars and wandering sannyasins, everything possibly you could find there in the Mahabharata, and all these juxtapositions and contexts that are really beautiful. So you'll find that it has been reduced down into a readable and handleable English translation. Srimad Bhagavatam itself, one of the great Vaishnava scriptures. Uddhava Gita is a section of that where you'll find, just like in the Gita you find Krishna and Arjuna, right? And that was that period of Krishna's life where he was there as the mediator between the Pandavas and the Kaurava clan. But then you'll find later on, at the time of Krishna's passing, he's got a disciple named Uddhava. And Uddhava, he teaches Uddhava in that period of his life in the same way he taught Arjuna during the Kurukshetra war. So Uddhava Gita is like the third stage of Krishna's life, when he's older and just about to leave the body. In fact, he tells Uddhava in the Uddhava Gita one night, I'm about to leave the body. And Uddhava says, take me with you. I found you, O Lord. I finally, after all this time, found you, and I don't want to lose you. And he says, no, you must stay behind and teach this wisdom to others, because the age is coming to an end. Everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket, as it were. And you must stay behind, but do not associate with cities and people of worldly nature. You must stay free. Where will I find you, O Lord? Uddhava says. You'll find me in the hearts of the seers and saints who gather around Duni fires, holy fires at night, speaking about me. You'll find me in their hearts. So you'll never be without me. So this is kind of the example of the dialogue that's going on between Krishna and Uddhava. Very beautiful. And that's, as I said, where I got a lot of the ideas for the Uddhava Gita. The 24 Teachers of the Avatut, that book I produced. Then after that you have Narada's Bhakti Sutras and Sandilya's Bhakti Sutras. Those are the sort of definitive scripture on the devotional path, bhakti path. Those deal specifically with the pathway of devotion and faith in Indian scriptures. Those two, those would be the authorities there. And the Code of Manu, one of the great scriptures that deals with how to act in the world, your code of ethics and morals. India had to have a scripture like that too, you see. It usually is more tied up with the realization of God and the spiritual path. Their scriptures are more oriented toward that. But in the Code of Manu, you'll find a lot of the code of ethics and things that go on that India is always operated by. The 4 caste systems, for instance, are commented on there and kept pure. So it's a very must-read book for that, on that level of scripture. Now in the middle box there, you'll see probably the only existing scripture left of Samkhya Yoga. Samkhya Yoga is one of the oldest of all systems. In fact, you see these 5 here, 5 footprints. You see these 5 things here, these 5 things here, these 5 things here, these 5 things here, and these 5 things here. That is the 5-fold mind, the 5 subtle elements, the 5 knowledge senses, the 5 active senses, and the 5 elements, earth, air, fire, water, and ether. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. This is called the 25, or quite often if you leave out Mahat, or you leave Mahat out of that picture, 24 cosmic principles. Not leave Mahat out, but leave out Chitta, because that wasn't in the original 24 cosmic principles. That's all composed by Lord Kapila. And Lord Kapila was the father of Samkhya Yoga, and it's so ancient, and everyone borrowed from it. As I've often said, he was the first great seer to do his homework and write it down. He looked at the outer universe and the inner universe and found out the basic components of what it was composed of. Put them all down, and a lot of that ended up to be what's called here on the side of the chart, the quintuplication process. I had to put that in English. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, panchakarna would be the word in Sanskrit. How consciousness starts as 1 and comes out in 5s. And when it wants to go back to 1, it returns in 5s. And the path is that if you know these 5-fold manifestations that you're a part of, that your consciousness is engaging in, then you can easily find your way out and find your way in to the embodiment process and back to the source. A general nutshell conclusion to it all. Panchakarna, or of times I've called it cosmic projection. How the Mahat, the great mind, or Hiranyagarbha in this case, which is called Apara Brahma, the lower Brahman, projects everything out from it, and it just trickles down from causal to subtle to gross. The 3 worlds are causal, subtle, and gross, like deep sleep, dreaming, and waking. Again, AUM, right? These correlations. This is how consciousness plays or sports and moves, how it moves out in cycles and how it moves back in cycles. These cycles are called yugas, mahayugas, manvantaras, endless cycles, timeless cycles, much longer than the 4,320,000,000 year evolutionary cycle, which is just one cycle of science's evolution theory. So these are constantly going on in these cycles, and all presided over by Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, which is again the A, U, and M of Om, isn't it? The god of projection, the god of sustenance, and the god of withdrawal. And so all of that relates to this rest of this chart, which didn't know how I would actually segue into it, but coming out of the scripture here, Tattva Samasa Sutras makes a perfect segue, is that this was the only remaining Samkhya Yoga scripture left to us. And Kapila's ancient work, probably written by one of his students, actually, they say, that lived after he had passed. Anyway, that's a very powerful scripture to get in hand and read if you want to understand this Panchakarna process, and how you can look for 5s everywhere, and how you can use 5s to move back in, not just at the time of death, but in meditation too. There's a dissolution of the mind stream meditation I've been teaching, which is meditating on earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and connecting earth to smell, water to taste, fire to sight, of course, air to touch, and hearing to ether, right? Ether to hearing. So those connecting the 5 gross elements to the 5 gross senses, you find out how one came from the other. Now you've made a connection between your world. Everyone's complaining about, oh, we've lost track of nature, right? So they think getting back to nature is like, I'm stardust or something. No. The real truth is that you're not nature, you're soul. Nature's insentient, you're sentient. So you're going to have to find out how your consciousness got associated with 5 elements. And this is why at the time of death, the Tibetan Buddhists are teaching you that you have your first conscious death, you're going to have to let go of earth, and you're going to have to let go of water. That's why your mouth gets dry. You have to let go of fire. That's why your eyes burn and can't see anymore. You're going to have to let go of air. That's why you can't breathe when you're dying. So you've got this attachment to the 5 elements, you see, and this is a habit. And so you're coming back with that attachment to 5 elements. If you leave with attachment to 5 elements, you'll come back with 5 elements as your foundation. And this is called a materialistic person, a matter-oriented person, a person who's attached to nature only and doesn't know anything about the consciousness that's moving in and out of nature, which is separate, which is the wheat from the chaff thing again. Water and oil don't mix, you see. This is how we teach it to the kids. See, do water and oil mix? Yes, Babaji, they do. No, they don't, kids. So just wait 45 seconds and you'll see that they separate. So that's exactly how you want to separate from nature. Your soul does not mix with nature. It just has a relationship with it. But it is not nature. It's spirit. It's separate. See, the wheat from the chaff teaching comes forward in that regard. So if you learn that, then you can learn that my consciousness is not the body, my consciousness is not energy, my consciousness is not thought. And matter, energy, and thought are the 3 things that we're mistaking for God. We're replacing God with those things, you see. And so we don't know what God is. And when we try and know what God is, we think maybe it's our thought, or it's energy, or it's matter. But it's none of those things. And that's declared in the Upanishads, again and again. If you read those, then you'll get the gist of that. Svetashvatara Upanishad right off the top. The Atman is not matter, it's not energy, and it's not thought. Thought is conception. In fact, out of thought comes energy, and out of energy comes matter, and that happens in 5s. So anyway, teaching the dissolution of the mind stream, if the mind has become externalized, it can also re-internalize itself. See? If it's projected, it can withdraw. And you've projected and left things projected, you haven't taken them back, you see. So your consciousness is hanging out there in things that are associated with birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. What's wrong with you? Your soul is not born, it does not grow, does not experience death. That's the body-mind mechanism that's doing that, apparently. There's that word again. See? So withdraw. Know that that's your projection. Once you know it's a projection, it's your movie, then you can be free, you see, from projection process, cosmic projection, quintuplication process. So this is how you would master the apparently outward moving tendency of the mind, from cosmic mind all the way down to your individual mind. That is, through the collective mind into the individual mind. There's the AUM of Om again. Cosmic mind, collective mind, individual mind. So that's how profound teachings can get in the scriptures. You're going to need a preceptor to explain them to you, and maybe to inspire you to look into them, because these are revealed scriptures. These aren't ordinary scriptures. And you've been raised possibly in ordinary scriptures and have been turned off to them. See? Because they don't contain what you're looking for. They're not illuminating you. They're not inspiring you. Religion itself is not inspiring you. This is why Vivekananda came here and said, we want to turn religion with a small r back into a religion with a capital R. The true thing again. Then you won't have this aversion to religion. It's not unnatural that you do in its present state. Fundamentalism, rank dualism, and so forth. But you need to have this Advaitic, non-dual look at them as eternal truths, like we said, not any of these other 3 ways, but that originless truth. They're at the foundation of your very soul, your very being, your very consciousness holds these truths, which have later been put into these scriptures. And they came down in 5 steps. The seers, the footfalls of the seers brought them down to earth. That's the on-earth part of this title. He brought those scriptures and those truths down with each one of those steps, from mind to inner worlds elements, to the senses of action, to the knowledge, to the senses of action, right on down to the 5 elements. And there's the list over here for all of you who are tripping up in the Sanskrit right now, because I wanted to give you both the Sanskrit reading of the fives, but here's how consciousness trickles right on down. From cosmic intelligence, the Hiranyagarbha, to cosmic mind, the Mahat. From that to the intellect, then to the ego, then to the mind, then to thought. From thought, audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor. From those five, hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling. From those five, speaking, handling, locomotion, procreating, and excreting. And if you look at the fifth of each one of these, earth goes with excreting, goes with smelling, goes with odor. Water goes with procreating, goes with tasting, goes with flavor. And you just connect them like that, and you see how one came out of the other, and how each depend upon each other for their existence. And all of a sudden, the whole thing is connected for you. See? In a very readily available, perfectly sensible way of looking at it. There may be other ways of looking at it, but here's one, you see, that maybe you haven't thought of. And it's not going to take you that much memorization. You already know about the five elements and the five senses. Now start looking into the fivefold mind and how these five senses and five elements take shape in your dream. Don't you have earth and fire and air and water and ether in a dream? Don't you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell in a dream? So those are your subtle senses. You have subtle elements and subtle senses in a dream. But your consciousness isn't just plugged into them that much. See? Because they're allocated here to the waking state. They're caught here. So let go, let go, let go, and take your consciousness with you. You're going to have to do it at death anyway, so why not do it as a practice in dream and deep sleep? Deep sleep is a kind of death to form. So you can start practicing this in meditation now. Just letting go of everything that's in the 24 cosmic principles. The tattvas of Samkhya Yoga. Well, I needed to spend extra time on that because that was a doorway straight into it. In the Tattva Samasa Sutras, you'll find this information on the 24 cosmic principles in its original form. But you'll find it in yoga, you'll find it in Vedanta, and you'll find it in Buddhism, and you'll find it in Tantra too. Kapila did his homework and he passed it on to everyone. In yoga, father of yoga is the one who said, alambana. See? Now take earth and meditate on it as an alambana. That means a station for consciousness. Think inside of your mind everything that has to do with earth. How many continents there are, what's earth made of, all the elements, all the metals, all the woods, everything you can possibly think of about earth. Take an hour, think about that, or a day, or a week. Just meditate on earth. And then as you do, your mind will make these connections with earth. It could be as varied as all earth has come out of a thought process, or it could be, I died in a landslide in a previous lifetime. And that's why earth doesn't appeal to me. Why do some people stay in houses and some people are out in nature? Some people don't want to go out into earth, you see. Well, there are reasons for that back in your mind. Blockages, karmas, samskaras, actions, reactions, fears, doubts that you're going to want to get to, and you haven't been getting to them. You've just been sitting, for a little while. Okay, I did my meditation, and you stood up and walked away. And you did that for 10 years, and you found you didn't make any real spiritual progress. Most you can say is, I meditated for 10 years. But when are you going to really start meditating? When are you going to know the kingdoms of heaven within you and visit them? Because that's what the seers do when they go to sleep. In fact, they don't sleep anymore. There's a song in India that says, a man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. All his dreams are radiant meditations. Those are the first lines of the song. A man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. That's my guru. See? So they're ever awake. They have yogic insomnia. Their body might go to sleep, but they don't. See? The mind is, that's the third eye opening. That's the ever awake mind you're talking about. There's no need to sleep. You've heard, haven't you, God doesn't sleep? Well, they've become God. That's their very nature. You see, not nature. Their true nature, not the 5 elements. So, good, we had a chance to get into this on earth. And we can show this again at another class. This is a brand new chart. But Tatma Samasa Sutras, Samkhya Yoga at its best. Now, there's Patanjali's Yoga Sutras next. That's called Raja Yoga. That's called Patanjala, named after the father of yoga. He's the only great seer that ever had a philosophy named after him. He's so revered in India. It's also called Ashtanga Yoga, 8-limbed. And that has to do with yamas, niyamas, 5 of each. 5, again. See, you'll find the 5s everywhere. And then asana, pranayama, pratyahara, whichever one falls out of yoga because they can't keep their mind from meditating on objects, you see, from being attached to objects. Pratyahara. And then dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Samyama, it's called, the 3 upper limbs of yoga. So that's the 8-limbed yoga, and his sutras are readily available in many fine commentaries. Quite a few. In fact, there are some 42 Indian commentators that you can look into if the American ones aren't doing it for you. Because the Indians are more into their scriptures than we are. So it's good to take up an Indian teacher. I studied with 2 Indian teachers only. Now, Viveka, Jivan Mukti Viveka. Jivan Mukti Viveka. See, that's a very powerful scripture. Probably more suited for monastics than for householders, but I'd say the householders can get some really good teachings out of it. Like the 4 stages of renunciation for household. That's a good teaching for householders. Panchadasi, that's again up here to the Panchakarana level. That's one of the Advaitic scriptures that in the very first chapters is going to deal with how 5s happen. See, so Panchadasi is more readily available than these Samasa Sutras of Kapila. So you can look into that. That's on the shelves, Panchadasi. The Dhammapada, I had to put it in there because we feel Vedanta and Buddhism are the same. I don't really see any difference as Vedantas between Buddhism and Vedanta. That's some religious war that's going on somewhere, you see, in somebody's deluded mind. Buddha was an Indian man. It's sort of like us saying, oh, Christ was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, you see, and he came from America or something. Or he was European. You see, no, you have to look back to the dusky skinned, dark-eyed, olive-faced Christ. You know, it was a part of his area in the Middle East. Same with Buddha. He was Indian. He was born in Kapilavastu, which was actually Kapila's birthplace. The very man I just mentioned who gave us these Tattva Samasa Sutras. Many, many millennia later, Buddha was born right there in Kapila's birthplace called Kapilavastu. It's now part of Nepal. So I was in Nepal a few years ago and I said, yeah, Buddha was an Indian man. He said, no, he was Nepalese. I smiled and didn't say anything. Everyone wants to claim Buddha. It's rather unclaimable, but is one of the greatest of all souls India's produced. So I had to put the Dhammapada in there because I could have put all the other Buddhist scriptures in, but Dhammapada is original Hinayana Buddhism. It's like kind of from the source when Buddha was living, the Dhammapada, just not too long after he passed, all the arhats, monks, got together, and what did our master tell us? And then they gathered everything that they could think of, some 500 arhats, and put it into that scripture, so it's called the Dhammapada. And so it's not going to get too far afield or too deep into Nagarjuna or some of these Buddhist paths like the Mahayana and the Vajrayana and Tibetan and all that. But it's going to stay more toward the early Indian scriptures, which is helpful for us when we're doing a study of Indian scriptures. I mean, specifically Indian scriptures. Yoga Vishishta, a classic. I've even put out a version of that and of my own. a condensed version of Yoga Vasishtas on the shelves, but there's some very good, I mean, it's got a cult following, that scripture. You can look it up on the web if you want. And there are people who just forget all this. We're just going to follow him, you know. So Lord Vashishta, you know, he was teaching Ram. You see, at the earliest avatar, he was the hoary old priest that was teaching the young Ram way back when, and that's all related in Yoga Vasishta in that scripture, how Ram went on pilgrimage with his brothers and came back totally changed. He was just so radiant and happy before he left. He went and saw suffering in the world, came back totally depressed, indrawn, and how Vasishta dealt with that in him, that change. There are beautiful stories in there of both Ram and Vasishta, and then of course all these other stories that Vasishta pulls out of the Indian lore to help explain Maya and things to the young Ram, the young teenage avatar. Nobody knows he's an avatar yet. At Ram's time, when he was a teenager, only 12 souls in the whole world knew that Ram was an incarnated avatar. Only 12. Vasishta was one of those. So he's got this young charge who's the God of the worlds, the Lord of the worlds, right there in that little boy. So this is what he has to do to try and lead him through these teachings. So it's beautiful, classic, Lord Vasishta. Now the last block is all, or most of all, of what Shankara wrote. I put it up there. Of course, the ones that we've studied most are Vivekachudamani, Aparokshanubhuti, Drigdrishya Viveka, and Atmabodha. Those four I've actually taught in classes and retreats since SRV was incepted some 20 so years ago. So I brought those as much as I could into the context of the Western mind. These others are a little less studied, but just as powerful. Tattva Bodha, Vedanta Keshari, Prapanchasara, Atma Anatma Viveka. That's very good if you're having a problem with the difference between the Atman and the Anatman. Speaking about Vedanta and Buddhism, again, in their disagreements. So-called disagreements. If you know the difference between the Atman and the Anatman, that puts that into perspective for you. The Moha Mudgara and the Vakyavritti, that is vibration of speech, of holy speech, Vakyavritti. Those are all very powerful teachings by this Amsa avatar, this great soul in 700 AD who actually not only commented on many of these great scriptures, but composed his own scriptures. You just don't see that happening very often. A composer of scriptures in contemporary times. It's just marvelous, you see. Now let's read these quotes to finish up this chart. The revealed scriptures and all the teachers of the world have their existence through the Atman. That is the eternal indivisible soul, Atman. Faith, devotion, and constant communion with the wise, these are declared by the sacred scriptures to be the seeker's direct means to realizing it. It is hard for any embodied being to achieve a human form, strength, and purity. More difficult still is to desire to live a spiritual life. And hardest of all is cultivating an ability to comprehend the Holy Scriptures. That's by Shankara himself, in the Vivekachudamani. You can read that there. So he's talking about these differing degrees of difficulty that people, strength and purity, pretty hard to get that, we'd say. The will to live a spiritual life, that's pretty difficult, but to try and develop a capacity to understand this non-duality that's being taught here, that's going to take some doing. Vivekananda told us that when he was here. He said, it might take a lifetime or two, but Jnana Yoga is the quickest path to enlightenment. If you can take up the scriptures and understand them, you'll be out of your lifetime sequence in 1 or 2 lifetimes. And that's a lot of karma and a lot of samskara to expunge or to neutralize. But you want to do it with this sword stroke of wisdom. Otherwise, there's the bhakti path. That's the long, slow boat to China, or to India rather. Beautiful, scenic path. See, I'll take my time, I'll dance, I'll sing. I'll love God in all the wrong places. Well, unless I read the Narada Sutras and Sandhya's Bhakti Sutras, then I'll know what true love is for God. But that's very non-compromising. Can't look at Narada and he's not going to give you much wiggle room for your surface devotion. He pretty much puts it down. Your karmas can be destroyed. I mean, Jnana Yoga is usually what destroys your karmas, but they can be destroyed by bhakti only if your bhakti is intense, he says. If you really love God deeply and profoundly, you can destroy your karmas from this lifetime and past lifetimes. Prarabdha and Sanchita. And no more agami karma, future karma will come to you. 3 kinds of karma. But that's usually done fairly quickly by reading these scriptures and getting your eye single again. See, you can pretty much destroy karmas. Bhakti yoga is going to have to be very intense, he says, to do that. So it's a good way he speaks about that. Now this final quote at the bottom, Swamiji, I had to put that in there. I have never lost faith in a benign providence, nor am I ever going to lose it. My faith in the true religion and the revealed scriptures is unshaken. Swami Vivekananda. So he, like I was just saying, he wanted us to, when he first came to America in 1893, wrote back to his monk brothers, send Panini's grammar on Sanskrit, send the Upanishads, send English translations of any of these scriptures, they need them here, we want to study them. And then he told us, spend time reading these, they're very important. And this is at a time when people are averse to scripture, because they've come up against ordinary shastras so much. That is, things that are untenable and unacceptable. Shall I tell you a few? Eternal damnation. Original sin. Those are untenable and unacceptable in India. So, original sin gets replaced with original perfection. Your soul's divine, you see. It cannot be made impure. So, those kinds of things need to be put in their right perspective. I have no problem with eternal damnation because I see people in it. But, a place of hellfire with a devil with a pitchfork and fire, taking it literally, you're taking the wrong things literally. You should be taking the right things symbolically. See, you should be looking at these teachings at whatever level you're understanding them on and putting them in the right perspective. But one thing you don't really have to do with perspective is in the non-dual scriptures. They are non-dual, obviously, and there's no way you can make them otherwise. You can't interpolate them, and that's particularly why no text torturing has been going on in India. See, as Vivekananda said, these have come to us thousands of years older than Bible, Quran, and so forth, and nobody's meddled with them. No King James has got a hold of them. What's a king? What does a king know about scriptures? He's a king. He's not a monk. These have come through great souls that have kept them pure, and thousands of years they've done so, and they've come to us in this form, right on the shelf, out there in the hallway in our bookstore, uninterpolated, pure, and able to enlighten you in this very lifetime. So, then again, a final mention, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and the complete works of Swami Vivekananda would be a good complement in a more contemporary way. All right, so we did manage to accomplish this chart. Just another mention of cosmic intelligence all the way down to the element Earth in fives is a very good way of taking stock of the tattvas, tattva gyan, it's called. If you're following a path of bhakti, it's more upasana dhyan. You're meditating on deities. But in this particular way, you're following the path of tattva gyan. You're meditating on principles. Deities need stations to occupy. So I'm not putting these in separate places. the deity, you, consciousness, your divinity, needs a station to man. So these are stations which consciousness mans. Your hearing is a very powerful station, isn't it? Consciousness is visiting and giving it its ability to hear. So there's not just the ear flap, as we're talking about, but the power of the ear to hear is inside the ear. See? So in India, when you say eyes, it's the power of the eyes to see. It's not just this fleshy orb, see, which if you cut the optic nerve to is open but not seeing anything anyway. See, you cut the pranic energy to it. There's no prana flowing anymore. It's blocked. So each of these stations has a capacity, limited, no doubt, for consciousness to manifest itself through. If your senses are impure, then very little of consciousness is getting through, isn't it? You're not seeing much, you're not hearing much, not tasting very well, not smelling very well. You've lost most of the facility of the beauty of the senses. But the senses are outward going. Mundaka Upanishad, the senses are outward going, therefore they're defective in nature, by nature. So you have inward senses, tanmatras. See, you should probably look into them. Inward senses and inward elements, both you have to experience those. So again, you're taking up the station of consciousness is, or awareness, timeless, deathless awareness, visiting stations. That's called upasana. That's called tattva gyan. You're meditating on gyan, stations of wisdom. Each one of these is a station of wisdom, but it has more capacity and less capacity as it quintuplicates itself outwards. And as it begins to identify with the senses, like Father of Yoga said, the seer has become identified with the seen, and that's a big problem. It should just be associating with the seen through the senses. It shouldn't identify with what's seen. It should be the seer. I am the seer. I am overseeing all that I projected. There's no God in this, and there's no devil. It's all you. Any self-respecting God would not come here. Not the bliss they're experiencing in transcendental realms. Why would they want to come here? So this is all you're doing. God had no finger in it. Devil is not there, you see, except as your own passions, fetters, antarayas, kleshas, and maya and samsara. Whatever you let slip into the cracks of your thinking consciousness in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, that's your devil. And get rid of it now. Turn it all divine. And that would be Upasana Jhana. Now you're meditating on deities. Now that you have the stations clear, let's see how consciousness is manning them. See? Isn't it? You're seeing God in everything, right? So what is the power which sees God in everything? Because I can see God in everything, but I'm still externalizing. I want to know the power which is enabling me to see God in everything, you see. So each of these stations is very precious. It can be very worldly and very dull. It can be a prison house of suffering, right? Each one of them can be a prison house of suffering. Procreating, excreting, tasting, feeling. It can be dull and boring, and you see, depleted. But it can also be a mart of joy. See, each one of those stations can be receiving the bliss of consciousness to the degree that it can experience them. That's why you want it to develop capacity, right? You want to develop capacity. And he wants you to develop capacity for these too. So let's put an end to this chart there. It's rich, and more, we can look at it more again later. Now let's go on here to this. We might have enough time to, in the 20 minutes remaining, take the next step in the supreme pathway to the eternal moksha. This is probably more hands-on. This has been a little bit esoteric, I'm sorry, but it just was very important to give out. Let's look at this Holy Mother's teaching on the two main forms of desire, because Vasishta had it way back in the early time. He says, free the mind from subjection to impure desires, vasana is the word, and make it associate with pure vasanas. Vasana is a Sanskrit word for desire. So that brings up a saying of Holy Mother. She says, there are two kinds of desires, one that stimulates enjoyment, the other that quickens dispassion. Now, here's the Viveka again. If we know the difference between the desires that bind us down and desires that fulfill us, then that's pure Viveka, that's discrimination. Because you would not believe, or maybe you would, how many students come to me in private meetings and are confused about this. But Babaji, you said not to have any desires, but I have a real desire to read the scriptures and a real desire to meditate. And, no, that's not what I mean, you see. Those are good desires. Those are positive desires. You want those. Sri Ramakrishna made a comment once. He said, I don't know what hinchi greens are, but in India, he said, some greens can really give you gas and cause you digestive problem. He says, but hinchi greens don't do that. If you eat those, that's really good for your digestion. You would not know what he's talking about. He's talking about the two kinds of desires. Some desires are good for you, some aren't. So just find those out and give them up, the ones that aren't, and expand in capacity these desires that help you. Let's see what she says about it. I'll go across the board. Desires that quicken dispassion, desire for God realization would be first, according to her. Across the board, a desire that stimulates enjoyment, desire for matter. On all levels, really. I mean, you could just be a materialist and say, or a sensualist or a hedonist, I just want my object. I want to own that furniture, or I want to shoot up those drugs. Whatever the object is, I want it, see, on all levels. But you can also have a desire for matter by being a physicist. See, matter is my whole world. I make my money on it. I think the secrets to existence are in matter. Wrongity, wrong, wrong. The secrets to existence are not in matter. They're in your own intelligence. Because matter came out of your intelligence. Read my chart. Where are you going to go to find where all of these are connected but cosmic intelligence? You're going to have to trace everything back to I am, or I am Atma Brahma, or this self is Brahman, or I and my Father are one, or Brahman is pure intelligence, Prajnanam Brahman. That's one of the four greatest sayings in India, Prajnanam Brahman. Brahman is pure intelligence, Pragya. So trace it all back and prove it to yourself. I dare you. Then be a physicist if you want. Because then everything you're discovering is going to be full of wonder. So the desire for matter, in that sense of the term that we're looking at it, definitely a desire that leads more towards enjoyment or bondage. Pain and pleasure is, of course, are connected. Pain and pleasure are connected. The quote below that, the aim of life is to realize God, but do not worry, only strive. The desires of your mind, you must fulfill them. Later on, you will attain to eternal peace. The teachings of Holy Mother. Let's see, Sri Sharada Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's beautiful divine consort and wife, who outlived him by centuries, by decades. Those teachings are very beautiful, like the whole overall teaching here of clarifying the two kinds of desires. But you can see how she gives us a little wiggle room, a little concession. There's desires in your mind, you'll have to fulfill them. But don't worry, just study. In time, you will fulfill those desires. and then you'll attain to eternal peace. So it just wants you to brood or worry about that. All you need to do is take refuge and then go forward in the path. If you haven't taken refuge in the Dharma, if you haven't gotten mantra diksha, if you haven't taken hand with the Sufis, if you haven't taken refuge in the Buddha, I can go on and on. If you haven't been baptized in the highest sense in Christianity, then everything you do amounts to nothing. Those are all zeros placed on end. Add them up, total zero, right? But put the one in front of them, huge number, right? So that one is your refuge in the path, preceptor, and teachings, Dharma teachings. Then everything you do from then on, even if you have karmas in the mind, it's like a spool rolling in the opposite direction, she said. There's white, red, and black thread rolling on a spool. That's your good, bad, and mixed karmas. Take refuge in the Dharma, the spool stops spinning, and it rolls off the opposite way. And you'll feel all the karma that you've accumulated in past lifetimes in reverse. It goes really quick. If you don't resist it, it goes really quick. Working the karma onto the spool of your mind took lifetimes. Working it off, one lifetime. So this is her teaching too, the spool, the mind teaching she gave. Now, spiritual wisdom and worldly knowledge, side by side. One quickens desire, quickens dispassion, the other stimulates enjoyment. So you want to gain that spiritual wisdom, which is the point of this whole chart and the end of this chart that we have been talking about in the Jnana Yoga paths last week and most of this class. She says, quote her, "A man of knowledge does not commit any discretion. It is only the ignorant people, devoid of wisdom, who commit sins and are thereby seized with fear." You don't see a wisdom knower walking around seized with fear. Wide open. See? Has nothing to fear. Has not committed any sins. In fact, she herself said once in a conversation, she says, "I don't remember any sin or transgression I ever committed in any of my lifetimes." So then why this disease? Malaria, skin rash, things that she suffered because people came and touched her feet. People with karmas came and touched her feet. I know what that's like, see. So this is, she's showing her pure nature that she's always in contact with, you see. My teacher said about her, "I've seen her face, I've heard her voice, now I long for her grace with all my heart." So, this is a woman, a goddess that we need to look into in this day and time. She was with us very recently up till 1920s. I think 20s she passed away. Where Sri Ramakrishna was gone by 1886. She outlived him. He left her behind as the ideal woman. And just gathered some of her teachings here. Let's look at some more. On one side, desires that quicken dispassion, the well-beings of others. If you have a desire for the well-beings of others, that's a positive desire. You should run with that. As opposed to desire for wealth and possessions. That's selfishness. She says, "The worldly crave for money only. Never have they prayed for knowledge or devotion, even mistakenly. But my children, try to remove the suffering of the world." And she also put that in another way once. She said, "You have come to Sri Ramakrishna. He has freed you. You have gotten his mantra. You will not have any more lifetimes. Now, since you're on your way to perfection, won't you turn and help those along the path?" She said. So she held these two ideals. You know? And Swamiji later put that into the motto of our order. It says, "Atmano moksharta jagaditaya cha." For realization of the self, Atmano moksharta, and Jagad, world, the good of the world. So get your self-realization first, then help the world. It's actually very beautiful. You don't help the world and then try and get God realization later. That's a mistake we've been making forever. You're full of mistakes and you want to help other people get rid of theirs. That's happening at all levels of society. See, people who have, in fact, reminds me of Ram Prasad's beautiful song, to hope for help from friends, relatives, or family provides no profound solution. Don't you know that all are lost here? Everyone lives in pallid imitation of everyone else. See? Everyone lives in pallid imitation of everyone else. It's just a round of mockery. See? So, first, Atmano Moksharta, get realized, get yourself free. Then, try and turn to help others, she says. Finally, or not finally, but right in the middle here, desire for God realization, that is a desire that quickens dispassion, would be unalloyed spiritual bliss. If you want bliss, take it, have it. Shankara says in his scripture, you should practice having samadhi. So you can't have samadhi yet, but assume the position. You should say, my true nature is samadhi, it could happen at any moment, by the grace of God or by my own self-effort, whatever the case, samadhi is on me right now. It's upon me. I'm about to have it. Here it comes. Got to have that kind of enthusiasm for it. Sanskrit word for that is utsaha, enthusiasm for the path. Sri Ramakrishna said, so that soon your chest flushes red. You see, your eyes roll up in the head, hair stands on the end of your arms. You have that kind of desire for moksha, mukti, kaivalya. She says here, the loose screw of the mind craves objects of enjoyment. On the other hand, if the screw gets tightened properly, one follows the correct path and obtains peace. So there's a screw loose somewhere, evidently. Sri Ramakrishna had a beautiful story about that. He said the sailing ship was going towards its destination. It went by this mountain made of iron, magnetic iron. All the screws were taken out of the hole, and it sunk, and everyone on board died. What's he talking about? You'd wonder. Actually, you'd think maybe it's got something to do with desire. No, it's actually meaning formlessness. The body-mind mechanism of your psychophysical being is held together by these screws of desire and so forth. If you go by the magnetic iron mountain called God, all of those screws will get pulled out, your ship will sink, and you'll become one with the ocean. He's clever, he's tricky. Gotta find out how he means that. He's that strange character that jumped out of the carriage and danced with the drunkards in the street. See, because he thought they were all intoxicated like he was. If they were intoxicated on wine, he was intoxicated on God. He used to go by them, they were playing cards, old men. And the gospel says, he yelled, go forward, go forward. Can't sit and play cards in your old end when spiritual bliss is waiting for you, see, right around the corner. Speaking about going home and old associations, bingo and cards and so forth. I went by a church once in San Francisco, walking along the street. I think it was Sunday afternoon, just before dusk. And this church, big church there in San Francisco, near Silver Avenue, slats in the windows. You couldn't see in, but you could hear what was going on. So I inside listened to what are they doing in church these days? See, so I listened, and out came B9. And a couple minutes later, C13. Playing bingo at church. Okay. Well, the opposite side of unallied spiritual bliss is pleasure via the sense objects. Those you must attenuate. That is, if you have those desires to feel those things, you can and will do it in the Dharma and be free. Next, increase your devotion to God. That's sometimes I hear that from people. Is that a desire to increase my devotion for God? No, that's actually something that will quicken your dispassion and get you free. However, on the other side is power over other beings and over nature. That's actually an occult power called Ishitva. It means domination over nature and other beings. And that extends into the inner worlds too. Beings who want to control the angels, the celestials, the ancestors, the gods. There are beings that have this strong penchant for domination. You'll see them out here in forms of Napoleon and Attila the Hun and Alexander the Great, so forth. They come from inner realms, and they want to dominate and control. You see, so they get power. But the devotees come and they say, grant unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and take unto yourself what is the Lord's, and they get peace. One gets power, the other gets peace. So she makes the distinction there, and she says here, the worldly and wicked do not feel the presence of God in the image. The deity disappears before them. Only the one who prays to God eagerly will actually see him there. So that's about puja, like this altar here. If you go up to that altar with a mind that is already highly spiritualized, then you'll see God radiating through all those images. Sri Ramakrishna used to see Mother Kali in the statue in the Kali temple at Dakaneshwar come alive for him and dance. He said, one night I was walking up the stairs of the Kali temple, and she came running up behind me and went past me. Swoosh, just like that. Her anklets jingling, he said. So we have to think about that. Ritual, mundane ritual, we've said the downside of that. But for the pure-minded person who sits to worship, the deity comes alive. The deity visits the picture. Sri Ramakrishna said about his own picture right there, said that will become worshipped by hundreds and thousands of people in the future. Imagine saying that about your own picture before you were famous. But now there's 5 million people worshiping that picture. See? So he said there's a lot of power that is in an image. A lot of power is in an image. So that's the bhakti side of things. Not that it's divorced of jnanam, wisdom, but that's the bhakti side of things, that you'll see God manifest in that particular person, place, or thing. It can be a church, it can be a temple, it can be an old ruin, it can be a Kaaba or a Mecca, a lot of power there. Yeah. With a few minutes left, we're finishing up this step. A good desire would be serving God and humanity, other than ego gratification and selfishness. About that she says, selfishness, well, that persists as long as the person is self-assertive, but it disappears when it is overcome. But we have all come here to serve all beings. So her idea for the purpose of human embodiment would be serving God and mankind. What later Swami Vivekananda took her cue and said, this is labor as love. Labor as love. Or work as worship. That's how he put it. So this is karma yoga. This is the highest turn of karma yoga. Jnana, bhakti, karma, and raja, the meditation yoga. Those are the 4 yogas. Final here is a good desire to be leading a spiritual life, otherwise leading a worldly life is the contrast. She says, actually this is Sri Ramakrishna who said this, a palm frond easily drops to the ground when it turns brown, but if it is pulled off when the tree is still green, the tree gets damaged. So if he said that to you, you wouldn't know what he was saying, what he meant. See? But I've seen that happen in my own yard here in Hawaii. See it go out, walk by a palm tree every day or something, and see a small one. Pretty soon you see one of its lower branches is starting to sag. it's kind of greenish yellow. Then next day or two, you see it's kind of yellow, and then stagmore. Finally, it's kind of brown. Next day, it's lying on the ground. So Sri Ramakrishna saw things like that and gave a spiritual assignment to everything that happened in life. Everything to him was God. So seeing just the passing of a branch off a tree would hold a huge significance for him, and he'd use it as a teaching. So what he means there is your desires will go away like that. First, they'll just be hanging on, slightly greenish yellow. Then you do some more spiritual practice, pretty soon they're about to fall off, and pretty soon they're gone, they're off the tree, and you're free. See? So this is what he means by leading a spiritual life as opposed to leading a worldly life. A worldly life will fan the flames of desire, as you have seen. A spiritual life will, what does she say here? Quicken dispassion. Free you from bondage to objects, to nature, to forms, to rebirth, to karmas and samskaras, to activity, to restlessness, to slothfulness, and to the 6 passions, 8 fetters, 9 antaryayas, 5 kleshas, and all the other negativities that through our 5 series of classes here we have looked at. How many were there? 5. Pancha, yes, pancha. So here we must end because our time on the live streaming channel has ended. And we will see you live streaming weekend after next. Next weekend we are traveling, or we have off. And so don't look for us live streaming next weekend. But the following weekend, San Francisco, Saturday and Sunday both. And then the following 2 weekends after that, Portland, Oregon, Saturday and Sunday both. So 6 classes in all you can take in. Then our retreat on the mental asana, manasana it's called, on the Columbia River Gorge at Windward Waters. Beautiful place in the old growth forest in Indian land, off the Snake River, just off the Columbia River Gorge. We gather there for a beautiful retreat. And so I invite you all to look into that and attend with us. It's over the Memorial Day weekend. It's about 3 days long. And we can absorb ourselves in some of the mental postures that is necessary to, as Vivekananda said, and Vashishta concurs, absorb this wisdom and make it a part of our life in this very lifetime and be free from thence forward. So here we'll end with a chant. Om Asato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joitir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abhira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from the unreal to the real. And lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.